Good evening and welcome to Dinner with Downey. We're running a solo episode tonight to try out some camera work and the OSB studio, OBS studio. I don't know what it's called. I am author of the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. It's available at the link below. I am also president and founder of Chicago Johnny's Co., which makes olive oil jardinere and hot and mild and Midwestern cherry bourbon barbecue sauce, all available at Jewel Osco stores across Chicago and on Amazon. Today, we're going to make two pizzas from the same dough, and we're going to do two different techniques. One is laminated, and one is cured crust. The recipe we're working with is page 30. It's Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. I'll give a read off real quick for you that don't have the book. You can put all the ingredients into your KitchenAid mixer or whatever you have going on. The order isn't so important with Chicago pizza because we're not building long gluten strands. We're building short, tight gluten strands. So you can put everything in at one time and start mixing it. This is good for one thin crust pizza. If you double it, it's good for one 9-inch deep dish. But one recipe is very difficult to work in the mixer. So if you're going to do just one recipe, use the paddle. If you're going to double it or triple it or quadruple it, this is 4 recipes that I made today. You can go right to the dough hook. But if you're only doing the one, you need to start with the paddle because it won't come together and knead properly. So page 30, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. If you get a pen and paper, you're going to add 2 grams of salt, 1 gram of yeast, 10 grams of butter. In this case, I use clarified butter, which is ghee. And what that is basically just removing some of the moisture out of the butter. Just helps the pizza to be crisper longer. A little more buttery flavor too, like it's basically like concentrating it just slightly. So, and then 140 grams of Sarasota flour. You can use bread flour, all-purpose flour, a mix of both. Sarasota is historically what we used out here in the Chicago area, so that's why I use this one. And it's a mix. It's in between all-purpose flour and bread flour as far as the protein content goes and the gluten structure. It's also sold under Hecker's brand if you are out east and I believe south. So the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, you can pick it up on Amazon. There's a link for that in the description. And we're working with Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. So we're going to do 2 things here. We start with a cured crust, just because that is going to be cleaner and faster. So what I did earlier is I rolled out 12-inch pizza circles. I don't know, yeah, go on this one maybe. So I quadrupled the recipe, proofed it on the counter for 8 hours, knocked it down, put it in the fridge for, fuck was that, 2 days? 2 or 3 days. I don't remember what day it was. And then about 3 hours ago, I took the dough and rolled out a bunch of 12-inch circles, docked it, trimmed it, docked it, and then put it on a piece of parchment paper with some breadcrumbs and a little bit of oil to prevent it from sticking. And what that did is I don't know if you could hear this. It created like a crust or a skin on our crust that we're going to use. And it's called curing the dough, and all that does is it gives you a head start of eliminating some of the hydration that's in there to give you a crisper end result. It is also nice if you're doing a bunch of pizzas. This way you're not rolling out pizzas over and over again. You can just do them all at once, clean up your bench, get the flour out of there and shit, and then just start making pizzas. They cook quicker. They come out crisper. You can load them up if you want to. I prefer them not so loaded when you do it this way, but however you want to do it is fine. You could also see, this is an important note. So when I trimmed them to 12 inches. And you can already see we had some shrinkage as it was drying out, or curing. So this is a 12-inch circle, the white part here. And we lost, I'd say, a good 1/4 inch pretty much all the way around as it dried out a little bit. So this is the top. This is the side with the skin on it. It was exposed to the air. And then this other side is the bottom, and it's still got some wetness to it, some hydration. And what we're going to do today is we're going to leave the bottom as the bottom and the top is the top. Get rid of this parchment paper. We're going to go simple classic Chicago today because this is just mostly to figure out the camera work. We're going to start with our peel. Quick note on pizza peels. I like using a wooden pizza peel to put my pizza in the oven, and I like using a metal pizza peel to take it out. The metal pizza peel is very thin, so you can get in there easier and pull it out. You can see how thin that is. But when you put it in the oven, and it's not going to matter so much for these ones because they're cured, but the second one we do will roll out. When you put them in the oven, the wooden peel helps to wick away moisture. So what happens is when your crust is sitting on the board, or the other peel, whatever it is, it's constantly releasing moisture. And if there's nowhere for that moisture to go, you're going to have your dough sticking to your peel. Wooden peels will absorb a little bit of that moisture, which gives you a lot more time to play with it. And if you're starting out, I highly, highly suggest a wooden peel to launch it and a metal peel to pull it out. So first thing we're going to do is dust our peel, and you have a few options. You could use semolina flour, you could use cornmeal, you could use regular flour, you could use breadcrumbs. Today I'm using breadcrumbs, mostly because I made about 4 of these containers full of breadcrumbs, and waste not, want not. But usually what I try to do is match what's in the dough. So if this was a cornmeal crust, I might use cornmeal. If this was a semolina crust, I might use semolina flour. You could use regular flour. I generally don't use regular flour because I like the way that the breadcrumbs or the cornmeal give a little bit of texture to it. Cornmeal will taste, you'll taste the cornmeal if you're using that, especially on a dough that doesn't have cornmeal in it. The breadcrumbs won't affect the flavor, but it will allow you to, show you here. You can see that movement. So the breadcrumbs give you a little more time to dress your pizza before you put it in the oven. The longer this sits here, all the wet that's on the bottom, it's going to keep expelling that moisture, and it's going to get stuck on the peel, and then the crust is going to get stuck to the peel. We do not want that. Another quick tip, clean off the excess stuff on your peel before you put your pizza in, because anything that is not going to benefit the cooking of the pizza is just going to dirty the oven, and we want to prevent as much of that as we can, because you got to clean it out or it's going to burn out, and you don't want either of those to happen. So this is our cured crust on a wooden peel with breadcrumbs. First thing I like to do is add my sauce, which for me, I like simply crushed tomatoes, and depending on the brand you're using, you may want to strain them. This is a good consistency for me. Which camera are we going? This, to me, is a great consistency for what we're doing. So I don't have to strain these. This is Di Fratelli. Crushed tomatoes. Get them at Jewel. I think Walmart has them. I'm sure you can get good tomatoes online. And if you get the book, I got a whole section about tomatoes and ingredients and where to spend your money and where to save your money for thin crust pizzas that are, this is a sausage, pepper, and onion classic Chicago pizza with Romano cheese. Not a whole lot of the sauce is going to get tasted, so the quality of the tomatoes is not as important. If you're doing a simpler pizza or maybe a pizza with a lot less intense flavors on it, the sauce will matter a lot more. As we're making our pizza, we constantly want to give it a shake. Not constantly, but throughout the process. And that's going to prevent the crust from sticking. Again, this is the cured crust. It's not as important, still important. And when we do the next pizza, you'll see why that's important. So we did our sauce. Oh, this is, by the way, the Jardiniere. I don't remember if I showed this earlier. It's available at Jewel stores. This is my perfect pizza seasoning. You can use any seasoning you want. This is crushed red pepper, garlic, onion, oregano, basil, and salt. And this is just a good mix of stuff to put on pizza. Chicago pizzas specifically, I like. I'll give it a hearty dusting. And then a sharp cheese. In this case, it is Romano. And you can use Romano, Pecorino Romano, Parmesan, sharp provolone, Fontanella, anything with a little bit of funk to it. And if you want that funk flavor to really stand out, you can age your crust as well. So this is a 3-day ferment. They call it fermenting, not aging, but this is a 3-day ferment, so you get slight funkiness, not too much. You can go to 6 or 7 days on the ferment, and it'll be, the dough itself will actually taste probably as strong as this Romano tastes as far as funk goes. But that's all preference. I generally prefer a 3 to 5 day, but again, it's all preference, and I don't ever adhere to those rules. Cooking is generally a hypocritical process. What is it? Spice of life. Diversity? Well, taste is subjective, and cooking is subjective. What is diversity? What's the spice of life? We need a Googler going on there. All right, give it a shake. And now this is, if you get the book again, we'll go through the topping procedures. But generally, you want your dry ingredients below the cheese and your wet ingredients above the cheese. And in the Chicago area, or some of the Midwest even, outside of the Chicago area, Italian sausage is raw, and it goes under the cheese. You can put it on top of the cheese. Some places do that. I prefer it under because then it stays soft, and it will cook all the way through. Don't worry about that. If you prefer like a drier, more charred sausage, you can go on top of the cheese. It's pretty rare to see it on top of the cheese out here. And this is just Joel sausage. I doctored up a little bit with some fennel, garlic, onion. You could basically use pizza seasoning and fennel if you wanted to. And then, so this pizza is going to be sausage. This is Italian sausage. Sausage, bell pepper, and onion. So you have options with the bell pepper and onion. This bell pepper is on one of its last days, so it's dried out a little bit. So I'm going to put it under the cheese. If it was more of a fresh bell pepper I just cut, or a garden bell pepper or some shit like that, I might put it on top of the cheese. But today I'm going to go under the cheese. And you could slice the peppers, you could julienne the pepper, you could do rings, you could do diced. I change it up every now and again. I would say thin slices are my preference, but again, I mean, preferences change, or if you ate this 6 days in a row, you want something different, change it up. Give it a shake. Make sure we're still loose. And then onions, I almost always put onions under the cheese, even though they seem like a high moisture vegetable or topping. They'll dry out pretty easy. We got a 500-degree oven going on here, so put them under the cheese. And you can see why I don't work in restaurants. My knife skills are Stugats. Stugats? Garbage. What's trash? Stugats is stupid. Trash. I don't know. I don't have very good knife skills. My wrists don't work like a normal person, so adapt. Usually I would run stuff through a mandolin. It's perfect freaking tool for this. But I was just doing a pepper and an onion. I don't want to get the mandolin out for that. Again, a shake, and it doesn't look like you need this all the time, but when we get to the next pizza again, you're going to see why we do this. And then we do our cheeses. So you can do just mozzarella. You can do just provolone. You can do a mix. If I do like some of the fancier, like a mushroom and white sauce pizza, I'll do some fontina mixed in there with some mozzarella. With mozzarella, you want low moisture. And in low moisture, you could get part skim, or whole milk. You can mix those two together. You could use just part skim. You could use just the whole milk. But it needs to be low moisture mozzarella, or the cheese will run off the side of your pizza and make a mess. So this is a mix of Galbani, whole milk mozzarella, and deli provolone. This isn't the sharp provolone like the Half Moon you get in the case that's, plastic wrapped. What's that called? Shrink wrapped? Shrink wrapped. This is the stuff you get from the deli, either in slices or you can get a chunk from the deli too. But this is the stuff that's not aged. It's not real sharp. It's just deli provolone. I don't know how else to describe it. For this pizza, that's it. If you want, for looks, you can do another dash of seasoning on top of the cheese, and that'll give it more of the pizzeria style look. The reason that I put the seasoning on the sauce is that the way my taste works, I don't know if this is like for everybody, I get that sharpness from the crust, the saltiness, then I get a sweet acidic profile from the tomatoes, and then I get the herbs rolling around in there. Then I get the sharpness of the cheese, and then I get everything we just did, the toppings. It might not be like that for everybody. It's like that for me. And it's just a preference that I've had. You can put the seasoning on top and not on the sauce itself, however you want to do it. Cooking is preference. So we're going to make sure our peel and our crust are separate, and they are. We got plenty of movement on there. That's good. And I have the oven set up. Let me put this in, and then we're at 500 degrees. I'm going in on the bottom stone. Right there. Hear that sizzle. Love that chicken from Popeyes. Timer. We're going to start the timer at 9 minutes on this one. And the reason 9 minutes and not 10 or 11 or 12 minutes is because this oven's been going for a couple hours now. It's running a little bit behind. So I have the oven set up with 2 stones. And if you don't have a second stone, I recommend getting a second stone for the purposes of being able to adapt. And what I mean by that is, all right, so here's the, what is this, page 41 in the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, which is available on Amazon. When you're setting up the oven for deep dish, it's different. We're not going to look at that right now. We're looking at the thin crust oven setup. And all ovens are a little bit different. But on the lowest rack on my oven, I'm like less than an inch away from the base. And on top of that, I put my stone. And the heat source is down here. And I have the oven set to 500 degrees. That stone gets like 570 usually. And the longer it sits, the more intense the heat. So as soon as I put that pizza on that bottom stone, it is starting to cook that bottom of the crust immediately. So sometimes what will happen is the bottom will cook too fast. And when I have the second stone up top, and it's either the top rack or the one just below the top rack, depending on your oven setup, but you want a little bit of space there. And what I can do is move the pizza from the bottom stone, where it's cooking mostly the bottom real fast, to the top stone, which then has a little bit of air circulation on top of the pizza, which is going to cook the top of it. It's also got the, I don't know what you call it, the top of the oven, I guess, to reflect the heat back down on top of the pizza. This is especially important when you're doing wet ingredients and doing loaded pizzas. The pizza that I just threw in there was pretty heavy on the ingredients. I was pretty heavy-handed with them. So I'm probably going to have to move it up top at some point for the reasons of it being a heavy-handed toppings, but also that bottom stone is just scorching hot right now. But if you get the cookbook, it's got all kinds of tips and tricks like that. So the pizza we just put in the oven was the cured crust. It's the same dough, but this is, I made a quadruple batch, so I had 4 pizza crusts basically. Rolled out 3 of them, trimmed them, took the scraps and made another ball out of them. It's called laminating the dough. And what that does is, so you use flour, you roll out your pizza, trim your dough. So now you have a thin sheet of dough with flour on both sides. Kind of think of it like biscuit making. So when I put all those layers of dough together and then make a ball out of it, it will hydrate a little bit, and you can see right here. This is beautifully hydrated again, and it came together, but it's got those veins of flour in there. And what that does is laminates, right? Like, think of layers. And so when this pizza comes out of the oven, and it doesn't always happen a ton. Sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. You get the waves of crust. Yeah, so it's called laminating, but this is the same dough that I rolled out earlier. We're going to want to dust our bench and get rid of some of this breadcrumbs and seasoning. All right. Again, when you're dusting your bench, you could use semolina, all-purpose bread flour, whatever you want. I generally use the flour that's in the dough, and it will make a little bit of difference. If I'm using bread flour, it's got more gluten content, it's a little stiffer. So as it starts incorporating the bread flour into the dough, you're going to get different results than if you're using like a softer all-purpose flour or semolina. Semolina will give you a lot of texture. If you're using semolina, definitely use fine semolina. And then wipe your hands on your shirt. Get your rolling pin and your dough. So one batch of the dough recipe that I mentioned earlier gives you 212 grams, I believe. And that's good for one 12-inch thin crust. Or you can use less than that. So the one that I just threw in there, I think was like 180 grams. So that gave me about 20-something left over. You can go higher. You can go to like 220, 240 if you want the thicker, depending on what you're used to, what you like. A little bit thicker dough, you can go like 240. Again, it's all preference. And I wouldn't say there's one way that I do it all the time. I change it up a lot. It's a flat rolling pin. And as I roll, I want to go center out with my pressure, because what happens is you don't want to overwork the dough. So now when I come back on that pin, I'm not putting any pressure on it until I get about halfway down, and then I'll apply my pressure. The more you work your dough, the tougher it's going to be, the stiffer it's going to get. And so if I'm putting pressure on it as I go back and forth, I'm rolling the dough back to the middle, which then I'm going to have to roll back out. And so you just don't want to do that. Don't want to overwork your dough. You don't want to overwork your dough. Keep rolling, rolling, rolling. What? Keep rolling, 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 rolling. Fred Durst. You guys remember Fred Durst? It's just in that movie. Y2K. Fred friggin' Durst, man. John Otto, bring that beat back. Showing my age a little bit, huh? I just turned 41. All right, so I just mentioned that the one I threw in the oven was probably 170, 180, so it gave me some extra dough. And so this pizza, I can roll a 12-inch, it'll be a little puffier because it's got more than 212 grams because it's got the extra scraps from the other one plus the 212 grams that I made for this. I'm going to try and trim it back a little bit. But I'm going to keep a little bit of heft in it. So the one that went in the oven was probably the thickness of a nickel. And this one will be like the thickness of 2 dimes. You stack 2 dimes on top of each other. Some of you youngins might not know what the hell I'm talking about. But we used to spend money with change. It's an old person joke. Anyway. Take your 12-inch peel, or circle, or whatever you have. You got a mat with a silicone mat with the rings on it, whatever it is. And you're going to trim your dough. And you'll notice, for me, I keep my... this is just a pizza wheel that I'm cutting this, trimming it with. But I put it at a harsh angle. And the reason I do that is so that when I get done trimming, I don't have exactly a 12-inch crust, because all crust will shrink at least a little bit, sometimes a lot of it. And when it shrinks, I want it to be, as close to 12 inches as I can get. Also, if your dough isn't relaxed and rested, it's going to want to snap back. which is a big problem. And then also with the more you work it, right? So if I rolled it out just a ton before we got here, it's going to keep snapping back. It's tight. It's not relaxed. The gluten's intense. So we're loose. This is a pizza docker. You could use forks if you want, but all this is doing is preventing air bubbles from forming. And if you notice the way that this docks, the biggest air bubble you're going to get is between the punctures, right? So this might be an air bubble, but it's not going to be a big air bubble. And when you use your docker, again, I go center out, and this might just be me being meticulous with and over docking. But I go center out because you can see that it pulls the dough with it, and I don't want to push the dough back to the middle. All right. 9 minutes is up, and I'm guessing I'm going to have to move this pizza to the top, and I do. And I'll show you here quick what I'm talking about. So this was just on the bottom for 9 minutes. And this is done. I like it well done. If I keep it on that bottom stone, we're up here. If I keep it on that bottom stone, this is going to start to burn before the top actually cooks properly. We're getting some browning on the cheese. I'd like a lot more browning, obviously. Or not obviously, but I do. We'll rotate the pizza a little bit because it looks like the front of the oven is a little warmer than the back. And I'm going to put it on that top stone to try and brown the cheese more. And not overcook the crust if I can help it. When I do this, it's usually 1 or 2 minutes on this one. And it's, you figure this out as you go. We'll start at a minute. And then we'll get this pizza going. So we have my peel. Still some breadcrumbs on there from the last pizza. This dough hasn't been cured, so this dough still has a lot of hydration in it. And so it's more likely to stick to our peel. So we want a good dusting of whatever we're using for to prevent the dough from sticking. Let me get this on real quick so I can get that other pizza up. To transfer your dough, depending on how good you are at the process and how dry your dough is, I usually fold it in half and use 2 points of contact when I move it. Done with the docker. Get the old bench scraper out. And I'll get that pizza in a second here. I believe I own about 4 aprons, and I use none of them. Where are we at here? Well, we can still use another minute on this one. So this one was another 2 minutes. And that's relative to how your oven works. And there's so many other factors that go into that. And experience helps with it. Drastically helps with it. So I got this set up so we can get that pizza on here so you can see it real quick. But while we're waiting, let's take a look at the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. I worked about 10 years on this. It's got recipes, techniques, some stories, some artwork from my friend Jason Newman, pictures, friends and family, step-by-step instructions on how you put a pizza together, oven setup, weights and measures for toppings and whether they go above or under the cheese, how to cut a pizza. Sounds kind of stupid, but I'll show you in a second why. I got a recipe for Lou Malnati's. There's a recipe for Home Run In. There's a recipe for Chicago, the school lunch pizza. You guys remember those. All right, I'm confident that this is done now. All right, this is freaking beautiful. I'll give my peel a shake. I don't want to keep this too close to the oven. Let me get this out. If you don't, this is like $10. Well, I don't know what the fuck it costs now, but this is $10 when I bought it. Like I said earlier, my wrists are all kinds of jacked up. Cutting a pizza with the roller sucks. This thing for $10 will save you so much headache. I'll show you how it works in a second. Here you go, top. All right. So, like I said, there's a Chicago school lunch pizza in there. There is ingredients, what's important, what you could cut costs on, what you shouldn't cut costs on, types of stones, semolina whole wheat pizza, sourdough, cornmeal crust, which is probably my most requested. And then we got what I call novelty pizzas, so using jardinere oil in the dough. Or rendered cheese fat. This one was on WGN if you guys are local. You can look up WGN rendered cheese fat crust, Chicago Johnny's. Here's the home run in. Just, it's online. You can get it. You can download a copy, like $6, something like that. All right, so this is our pizza that came out. Well, you can hear how crispy that is. We'll get to that in a second. Let's finish. That's one thing at a time, right? Let's get our laminated dough going. So same thing as the first time. We're going to want to keep shaking the peel every now and again to make sure we're not sticking. And this one is higher moisture content because it didn't air cure or dry out any. But again, it's the same process. So we're going to add our crushed tomatoes. And then we'll season it how you'd want to season it. A few differences you will notice for sure, whether you laminate the dough when you do it or if you just roll it out and bake it without laminating. You'll notice it'll take longer to cook, for sure. You should pay more attention to the ingredients, wet ingredients, dry ingredients, because now the oven has to work double time, right? So we have to dry out our ingredients a little bit, but we also have to cook this crust. And this crust is very flexible, pliable, because it hasn't cured, compared to the crust we rolled out a couple of hours ago, which is not as pliable. It's just starting to dry out and form a crust, air crust on it. Shake. We'll do seasoning. So this is, again, Chicago Johnny's Perfect Pizza Seasoning. Available online. And again, I like to put the seasoning on the tomatoes directly for the process in which the flavors are hitting my tongue. This is how I prefer it. Totally up to you how you want to do it. We'll do a sharp cheese. In this case, it's Romano. I'd say almost exclusively Romano or Pecorino Romano when I'm doing these kind of pizzas. We do play around a little bit, and we'll do like a Fontina. Fontina goes really well with like a pizza with bacon toppings, bacon spinach, something like that. Fontanella, sorry, Fontanella for the sharp cheese. Fontina we do use when we do like a, what's the barbecue chicken? Barbecue chicken, which is a novelty pizza, I know. All right. So, same process with the first pizza. We're going to do sausage first, Italian sausage. Raw Italian sausage. It's important to note that right now the oven is going and the stone is reheating. If I would have thrown this pizza in right after I pulled that alone out, the stone hasn't come up to temp yet, right? So the oven's set to 500. I bake a pizza on it. The oven, so let's say the stone starts at like 560, 570. Put the pizza on and it drops. It can go down to like 460. And it takes time to come back up. So when I pull that pizza out, if I put another one right on it, I'm putting it on a stone that's 460, 480, 500, something like that, it drops it even more. So you need the stone to heat up in between pizzas. And that is relative to your stone, relative to your oven, and you'll learn it as you go. The thing I love about cooking And pizza's kind of odd because it's a mix of baking and cooking. But the thing I love about cooking is that it's arbitrary. You can adapt to it. There's nothing set in stone, you know. Or with baking, it's a very chemistry-oriented process, and you start messing around with that, and your end results can be totally messed up. If you get the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, again, it's got the weights and measures for these toppings, and where they would go under the cheese, on top of the cheese, how much to use. You can see I'm using quite large chunks of sausage on here. I'm a sausage freak, but you don't have to use such big pieces. It's up to you. Probably should have done the second pizza with toppings on top to show you how they dry out. You know, a lot of the 10 years I went into the cookbook was experiments, you know, and I put a lot of the notes in there from those experiments. Sometimes you do an experiment and you don't really learn anything from it. Sometimes you do an experiment and it totally changes the way you process things. This is the fuck did we get? Vidalia onions. You can use I like a little sweeter onion on here because I put their hot sauce or a lot of crushed red pepper, so that little added sweetness works well in my favor. But you can use white onion if you want a little bit more of that sharpness. Just don't use red onion. There is a way to use red onion on pizza. It's usually pickled, but just stick with the yellow or white. Make sure you keep shaking. Make sure we're loose. If we're not loose, it's better to find out early so you can get on top of it. Again, this is a mix of whole milk, low moisture mozzarella, and it's not always accessible depending on what part of the country you're in. I have a customer that has to use string cheese to be able to get low moisture whole milk mozzarella. You are more likely to find low milk or low moisture part skim mozzarella. Use what you can get your hands on, but make sure it's low moisture either way. The other mozzarella, not fresh mozzarella, but just like not low moisture mozzarella, will run off the sides of your pizza, cause a mess, and ruin your day. So I'll note real quick before I throw this in that this one has a little less cheese than that one. And the reason being is if I load this with cheese, it's not going to give that crust as much room to get rid of that moisture and crisp up. So try to go a little bit lighter on the cheese with a fresh rolled dough than you would with a cured crust. And again, if you want that pizzeria style look when it comes out, you put a little bit of seasoning on top, and that could just be oregano, just a little bit of green fleck. Clean off your peel, because anything that's not going to help us cook this pizza is just going to burn up in the oven and cause a mess. Everything that goes in the oven has to come out of the oven. We're loose, beautiful, and we're going to go back on the bottom stone. And this is important to note. The stone I'm using is actually a piece of granite countertop, and it's about this big. So when I cooked that first pizza, it was over here. Now what I'm going to do is put this pizza on the right side, and then about halfway through, I'm going to rotate it and turn it. And that's going to give the stone plenty of time to heat up and catch up. And this one, again, is likely to go in the top after we get going. And this timer, so I did 9 minutes on the other one. I'll do 10 minutes on this one. And I'll try to remember about halfway through to go rotate it, push it to the other side of the stone. This is all just stuff that it's in the book, but it just kind of comes with time. There is an art form to this, and art is subjective, so you're going to find what you like and work with it. Oh, anybody local get any storms today? Jesus. Thought the tree out front was going to blow over. All right, so we have our 12-inch cardboard. This is the pizza that came out first. It's not as hot, so I can hold it up now. We're going to give it a cut. Make sure you clean off your bench. So many times I have flour or breadcrumbs on there, I go to cut it, and the pizza just slides out. And I look goofy, let me tell you. So this was a cured crust. Let me show you a comparison real quick. So I rolled it out to 12 inches, which is the cardboard. And then it shrunk as it cured a little bit, and they all do that. And so this one's got a skin on it, which is beautiful. But it shrunk a little bit. Then when we baked it, sometimes they shrink a little bit more, sometimes they don't. That one did shrink a little bit. Once you cut it, you might not notice. So when we cut Chicago thin crust pizzas, this is a 12-inch, right? So we're going to get one cut right in the middle, and then one cut split the difference here, and then another cut split the difference. Then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. Again, start in the middle. You hear that? This is a beautiful pizza, man. Split the difference again. And I want to, wait here. Can you see this? So this is a piece of onion that stuck out the top. When I was putting this pizza together, I said I put these onions on the bottom under the cheese because I don't want them to dry out. This is a piece of pepper that got exposed. And so where you put your toppings above or under cheese is important. And there's not a right or wrong answer to it, but a lot of times it depends on what else you have going on with the pizza. This was a sausage heavy pizza. The dough was already cured, so I went heavy with the cheese, but I covered these vegetables, except for the little bits of exposed parts. But if I was doing like spinach or roasted red peppers, something very wet, I could put the onions on top because there's a lot of steam happening. In this particular case, there was not a lot of hydration in the dough or the toppings, so we didn't get that steam to really soften things up. Let's see what the bottom looks like. You want to be able, generally, and this takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, you want to be able to hold up a piece of pizza by the corner and it holds up. This is a very heavy piece of pizza. It's a big friggin' piece of sausage on there. 2 of them. But it still holds up beautifully. Where are we going? Can you see the bottom, or should we go here?
You can see the bottom.
Okay. Oh, I didn't see the bottom. How was it? Oh. Beautiful. All right. Can you go to this one, actually?
Mm-hmm.
So this was a cured crust. And I want to point this out because the other one's not going to have this. But if you see the little tiny air bubbles that are on here, are they visible? Those are what give you a little bit of that crispness. It's like a bonus crisp, like a crackery crisp. And what happens is when we cured the crust, the top skinned over, and the bottom still has some of that hydration, but not a lot, right? The yeast is dying off, the hydration is leaving the dough, but there's enough to give you these little bubbles, and you could hear it sizzle. I could hear it sizzle. You probably couldn't hear it sizzle when I threw it in the oven. And what was happening was the cracking of the hydration leaving that dough. That's fucking beautiful. Now I get to reward myself. It's phenomenal. I just don't try to describe how good this pizza is over and over again. It's just fucking great. It's exactly what you want for a thin crust Chicago pizza. It's crispy, it's thin, it's got a lot of unctuousness. You get a little bit of softness from the tomato, the crushed tomatoes, kind of offsetting the funkness of the cheese and the crust. is just near perfect Chicago thin crust. And this one's cured. And we're going to see here in a little while, we're about halfway done with this. I'm going to rotate this pizza. And that's coming along nicely. I'm glad I went a little bit lighter on the cheese on that one, like I said. And the reason being, the dough wasn't cured, so all the hydration is in the dough. And it's got to go somewhere. It's either going to get sucked out into the stone, or it's going to steam out into the oven. And this one didn't have that problem. This was already rolled out, it's air cured, not a lot of hydration for the shit to go anywhere. What can we talk about for 4 minutes? Anybody heard any good jokes lately? Oh, speaking of jokes, and you can take this pizza. Oh, maybe I'll leave it out here for another piece. Speaking of jokes, I mentioned a little bit ago that I was on WGN Morning News doing the rendered cheese fat pizza, which is page 107 in the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. It's available on Amazon in the link below. When I was younger, we moved from Buffalo Grove to Arizona, and I had entered a contest right before we moved, I think, or maybe it was in the move. They were looking for children to write jokes. So there must have been nobody else writing jokes that week, because this is the joke that got in there. What is round, purple, and dangerous?
Anyone?
Get ready to grab your belly. You're gonna be laughing. A grape with a 6-shooter. It's not bad for like 9 years old. So I made the papers. 9 years old. That's pretty cool. It's got a little kick to it, this one, a little extra kick. I added, so if you're, are we over here still? If you're making your own, Italian sausage is a very regional thing. If you're making your own Italian sausage, generally you can get some ground pork, and what I like is fennel is a big important part, and I like a lot of crushed red pepper. I added a lot of crushed red pepper to this, and as you could hear, it's a little spicy for some people and not as spicy for others. It was a little hot, but doctor it up the way you want it. I don't like black pepper in my Italian sausage. I don't like wintry spices. I know nutmeg is a big thing out east, I believe. But yeah, I don't make it how you want it. I grew up making sausage. Speaking of, there's actually a picture of my grandfather. Where are we at? That's my grandpa holding me, and grew up making Italian sausage. And then there's a picture of my grandfather here making it with his father. It's pretty cool, huh? Pretty freaking cool. Used to dry it out in the basement during the winter. Leave the window open and like a storage room, I guess. Oh yeah, we are at a little bit of runoff here. Actually, let me take this out for a second. So this was on the bottom stone, off to the right because the first one was on the left, for 6 minutes, and then I rotated it and turned it this way for 4 minutes. See, this is a very sausage-heavy pizza. A little bit of the grease ran off. Now the bottom is cooking very well, but I see that I still need probably 3 or 4 minutes on this top to get some browning on there. So again, I took it from the bottom stone, which the bottom is cooked good already, so we don't want to overdo that. We're going to move it to the top stone where the air will be able to circulate over the top of the pizza and hopefully brown out the cheese and dry out the toppings a little bit. Let me get that in. We'll do 2.5 minutes to start. Let's see where we go from there. While I have your ear for a second, couple of important pieces of equipment in the kitchen that is specifically helped in the pizza making process. This is pizza rocker. You can get them relatively cheap, like $6 probably if you go in a store. I got this on Amazon. It was $10. I don't know what they cost now, but for $10, you saw when I cut this pizza, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cuts, and we're done. If I'm using this thing, I have to knock it, roll it, and I'm putting all the pressure on my wrist. And I got to go back and forth, usually twice, maybe 3 times. And you do that all the time, and you got messed up wrists, you know? So, pizza rocker, definitely worth $10. And then this is a docker. And this one I actually got from a restaurant supply store for like $3. That was a long time ago now, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Best bargains. But it was not when I first started this process, but it was like 8 years ago. So I knew I was getting into this process. And before that, I would use 2 forks. And I'd roll out the crust, take 2 forks, and go, in the direction of the pizza, and just keep working my way in or out. And it just took too long. This thing for, I think it was like $3.95, well worth it. Bench scrapers, always a good thing, especially if you're working with sticky stuff, sourdough, anything really you want to get the solids off before you give a good cleaning on your countertop. What else is a good pizza? Oh, peels. So I like to use a metal peel. You can see how thin they are. When the pizza's already cooked, it slides right underneath. You take out the pizza, no problem. When you go to put the pizza on the stone, the wooden peel is much better. And the reason being is that the wood will take in some of that moisture, that hydration. And if you can use a wooden peel to put your pizza in the oven, it gives you more time to work on your pizza. This is extremely important early on in the pizza making process, because if you get a pizza sticking to your peel, it could ruin your whole night. Especially if you're doing an experimental dough, it's your first pizza, or the only pizza you're doing that day, it sticks. You end up with a calzone, or what's a cobbler type pizza or some shit, you don't want that. Again, we were at 500 degrees. Watch this. Like it just hangs off the edge like that. Like a frisbee. I do that all the time because it's a point of pride when you're making Chicago pizza that you could hold it up, flaky, crispy. And I wonder what people across the country think when I'm doing that. Like, this freaking idiot. Who wants a pizza that's, like a frisbee? So, while we're on the overhead shot, I believe, right? Are they both in? This pizza, both the same dough, made the same day. This one I rolled out probably about 2.5 hours ago and left it on the counter. It's called curing the crust. And you can see it's little tiny air bubbles. And that gives you an extra added crispness to your pizza. It doesn't necessarily add to like strength or anything like that, but it adds to the crispness, the flakiness you're going to get when you bite into it. This pizza, which we're going to cut here in a second, was rolled out right before we made it. So that's one difference. But a second difference is that this pizza is made from the scraps of rolling out the other 3 doughs. So we incorporated more flour into the process, which dries it out a little bit. But also, if you think of like a biscuit where you got those layers, but biscuits are working more off of chemistry and hydration or liquid coming off the butter and stuff. The same thing where you're getting layers, right? So the dough is flour, then flour dough, flour dough. So you're layering it up, and it makes a big difference. When I cut this here in half, we'll look at the inside, and we're likely to see some little waves happening. And what that does is, if you think of like phyllo dough, you get all those thin layers, real crispy, wavy layers, and that's hopefully what we're going to get here. This wasn't supposed to be a laminated dough. It's just the way that it worked out today. Another thing I'll point out is this one shrunk, but it didn't shrink a ton. Oh, we go up here. This is the one we rolled out, and it shrunk just maybe a 1/4 inch total on both sides, so like 1/8 inch around. This one, if you guys remember, was trimmed out to a little over 12 inches. It shrunk before we put it in the oven, and then it shrunk more when we put it in the oven. And that is normal, but you could tell. Now let's push this off to the side so we can see. This exposed white space is the shrinking on the one that we rolled out. This exposed white space is the shrinking on the one that we cured. So it makes a big difference. Just something to keep in mind when you are making your pizzas. Look at this. 2 fingers. Oh, God. This reminds me, so I think I have a story about this in the book, but go to a pizza place when you were a kid and you would smell the ovens as soon as you walked in. And it was the flour burned on the deck of the oven over and over and over and over again. And that's what this pizza smells like. Sounds like a weird fantasy to have, but it's good. So we cut this the same way. You could see this one, even though this onion is like fully exposed. Where are we at? Even though this onion is fully exposed, it didn't dry out like that first pizza did. And that's because of the extra hydration that's happening, the steam that's created in the oven. Gives it a little bit more time to bake off. All right, let's cut this bad boy. Oh, gotta stop cutting these so I can freeze them. I believe in St. Louis they cut them like this, or maybe like this. Let's see if there's anything to that. No, it seems weird. This seems weird, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what are you doing here then? It's cracking on the bottom. That does not seem right. I don't know what's going on with these St. Louis folk. All right, so let's look at the bottom of this crust. So remember, this one here, we got the little air bubbles coming from curing the crust. This one here we rolled out and put into the oven. Still hold it up by the edge. Beautiful. Where are we at here? And part of the reason is the thickness of the crust. Probably doesn't look like much, but this one's probably 40% thicker than this one. But what that does is it gives it more time to bake and get those layers, the lamination that we were doing earlier, talking about. It gives it more time for that to release some of the moisture, the hydration, and get us a real flaky, crispy texture. I'm stalling right now because this pizza is burning my hands, so I can imagine what it's going to do to my mouth. Let's take a look at the bottom. I love a crust that has nice gradient to it. Oh, look at that. And the color. So it's not all black, all white. There's a lot in between. Not a lot of burnt spots. These spots are where it was touching the stone. And you get a lot more dark spots doing this than you do this one in relativity, because this one has a lot more moisture. So when you put this on, it's creating those air pockets from the steam. And so it's separating. So if you think this is upside down, here's the stone. I have surface area here. It's cooking the crust and steaming. The steam doesn't have anywhere to go. So this crust has an air pocket between the actual crust and the stone. And that's why surrounding the dark spot is where all the steam was going. And it's putting a layer of separation in between the stone and the crust. Now let's get a corner piece for eating. Corners first, right? Corners first. It's kind of weird saying corners first in our own pizza, but that's what we do. I don't know if you could hear it. Crisp as shit. Phenomenal. Because this was one that we rolled out, it's slightly thicker. If I had to guess, I would say this one was probably 180 grams of dough. This one's probably about 215, 220. So 30 out of 100. It's a 1/6. So it's like 17%, something around there. More dough. But it's a lot more hydration than that. Because this dough was cured, so it dried out a little bit. This dough didn't cure, so all that hydration was still in there. This got to evaporate some of that hydration. This one did not. But it allows you to load up your pizza. This is much heavier. There's a lot of sausage happening on here. And you can't really tell, but I can tell from holding it. A lot heavier, but because of that added thickness to it, it holds up much better. So, thank you for joining me. Dinner with Downey, a solo episode tonight. Trying to figure out this camera angles. You got any questions or comments, leave them below. Pick up a copy of the Chicago Pizza Cookbook on Amazon in the link below. Stop in your local Jewel Osco store for Chicago Johnny's Hot or Mild Jardiniere, made with olive oil. Also, our Midwestern Cherry Bourbon Barbecue Sauce in the barbecue sauce aisle. Thank you for joining us.